Welcome to the second of the two audio recordings on the lecture on the U.S. Congress. When we look at the composition of the members of the Congress, we see that most of them are middle-aged and higher-income white men, but this picture is becoming more diverse as years pass. Some political observers humorously call this this profile for an average congressman male, pale, and stale. And but the good news is that as years pass, more and more minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and Native Americans are entering politics and becoming congressmen and women. When we look at the women's political participation rate in the U.S. Congress, we see that it's a little under 20% of all Congress people are women currently, while starting from 1993, these percentages have been on a very fast upward trajectory, which is a very welcome trend. Yet still the current state, around 20%, is quite low in comparison to other advanced democracies around the world. In Scandinavia region, for example, in Northeast Europe, countries like Iceland, Finland, Sweden, or Norway, or Denmark perhaps, you would see that the women are about almost half of their parliaments, whereas for us it's a fifth of the Congress only women. But this upward trend is a good trend, and in the future this will improve further. The year 2018 has become the women's year in terms of how many history-making women ran for office and won certain seats in either statewide or national elections. Here there's a video that explains the great accomplishments of these remarkable women. So because of time limitations, I won't be able to show them to you, but they are essential parts of this lecture, and accordingly a required part of it. So in your own studies, please make sure to check this video. I will be posting a link to these videos at the description below this YouTube video you're watching right now. So there are certain malfunctions with the U.S. Congress, so how do we improve those? To improve the level of diversity, it all starts with economics. If the economic conditions of minorities are improved, then they would have the resources they need to increase their political participation. We would be seeing more minorities running for office and participating in politics by volunteering for campaigns or donating money or canvassing and creating online petitions, etc. Various forms of political participation would increase among minorities if their economic conditions are improved. To improve the level of representation, so our lawmakers, our representatives, representing our preferences and priorities better, creating term limits has been proposed as one reform idea. The idea here is that currently we have something called incumbency advantage. We do not have term limits for Congress people. So when one particular individual gets elected to a position, then he creates a name recognition for himself, and in the following elections, voters tend to choose his name only because of the name recognition, but not necessarily because of the performance of the person in the position. And of course, this is a problematic situation. And also, secondly, not having term limits would mean that these representatives would spend too much time in Washington, D.C., and which means too little time in their local districts, because they are representatives representing certain districts from around the country. But if they have lived in Washington, D.C. for 8, 10, 12, 20 years, then they become disconnected from their local area, and they can't fully appreciate the needs and concerns and priorities of their local areas any longer. Thirdly, to improve the quality of the policies adopted by our policymakers or lawmakers, the regulation of lobbying and reforming campaign finance laws are two ideas that are very commonly shared by many Americans today. If there are any problems that are the root causes of most issues we face today, one could argue that lobbying and campaign financing are two of those issues, so they need to be immediately addressed in various. In this video, in this slide here, I'm sharing with you a video that explains the day-to-day workings of the U.S. Congress and the reason why it's such an important institution in our political system and in our everyday lives as U.S. citizens and residents. So just like with the previous video, the link to that video in the last slide will be shared in the description section below. So for how is a law made in the U.S. Congress? It all starts with a proposal. So someone needs to create a law proposal called a bill, and that someone can be an ordinary citizen. It can be the president, it can be a member of the Congress, or any organization, group, lobbying group, etc. It could be anything. And then the proposal needs to find a sponsor in the Congress, which is a member of the House or the Senate, who undersigns the bill to make it official and present it to the Congress. And then it comes to one of the two chambers. It could be House in some cases. The sponsor for a bill can be a member of the House or a member of the Senate. And then if the bill passes both houses, then it comes to the president's desk, and if he approves it, then it becomes the law. He has a right to veto it as well, and then it doesn't pass. Technically, the Congress still has the authority to rework on the bill, but they rarely do in order to have good relationships with the president. One concept that we need to know about the Congress is the notion of filibusters. Filibuster is basically talking a bill to death. Because what happens is that in the Congress, when a particular law proposal is discussed, a certain time is allotted to the discussions and the voting. And so if a member of the Congress does not appreciate the bill and doesn't want it to pass, then he or she can simply talk for hours to make sure that the time given to the discussions of this bill and the voting of it would expire, and the bill cannot become a law. This concept is called filibuster, and it's becoming a more and more employed instrument in the U.S. politics today. There are numerous examples of this, but a well-known case was back in 2013 when Fort Worth Senator in Texas, Wendy Davis, filibustered a bill that would restrict the abortion practice in the state of Texas. It was a filibuster that was within the state of Texas. It wasn't a national matter, but in terms of exemplifying how filibusters work, it was quite an interesting case. So in this slide, I am sharing another video about Wendy Davis's legendary filibuster in 2013. Please make sure to check it out. For a member of the Congress to successfully filibuster a bill, he or she needs to make sure that he has at least 41 senators' support. It's because there's a rule called cloture rule that says that 3/5 of all senators, which are 60 people because there are 100 senators in the Congress, can end a filibuster. So accordingly, 41 senators' support would be crucial for a filibuster to be successful. When we look at the historical trajectory of filibusters, we see that they are becoming more and more common, and which is why it's an important thing for us to understand. Some people argue that it's a good democratic instrument because it allows representatives who represent people's will, or the senators, to simply, display some passion and disallow a particular law proposal that they don't appreciate. But some others argue that it's just a cheap political tactic that kind of circumvents the will of the people and leaves too much power on individual members of the Congress. But what we can say for now is that it's still a legal practice that's being practiced quite commonly in the U.S. Congress today. The longest filibuster in the U.S. history was the filibuster done by Strom Thurmond back in 1957. Mr. Thurmond was a Republican senator, and he spoke over 24 hours to kill the Civil Rights Act back in 1957. In this slide, please make sure to check the video that I'm sharing here as well. Another concept we need to know is impeachment. Impeachment refers to the U.S. Congress charging a government official with a high crime or misdemeanor. And the process is that a prosecution is first appointed. A prosecutor is appointed, and then the prosecutor completes his prosecution, and then the House of Representatives reviews the evidence he finds, and then the House acts as a grand jury, and then moves the case to the Senate. And if it passes the Senate, then the person would be removed from office and be convicted of the crime or misdemeanor that's subject to the impeachment proceedings. In history, there's been 60 proceedings, 19 impeachments, and 8 convictions. And all of the convictions were federal judges. Only 2 presidents have been impeached so far. Andrew Johnson in 1867 due to abusing his authority when he fired the Secretary of War. And in 1998, Bill Clinton because he lied under the oath and obstructed justice about his relationship with a White House intern by the name Monica Lewinsky. Both were impeached by the House, but they were not convicted by the Senate. Accordingly, they both stayed in their positions. The only president who left office as a result of impeachment was Richard Nixon in 1974, and Mr. Nixon was involved in the Watergate scandal, and right before impeachment proceedings pointed to the fact that he was going to be impeached, he stepped down voluntarily and left presidency.